Okay, all right. You've landed on Island 49. I'm your host, Weston Smith. It is 1:30 Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, April 25th, which means we are about 6.5 hours or so away from the first pick of the 2024 NFL Draft. And 49er fans will be waiting a little while till our first round pick, picking at number 31 overall. But wouldn't it be fun if I didn't come to you live on draft day? Let's talk a little bit about 49er needs. Let's talk a little bit about pecking order. Let's talk about what we really care most about, specifically on the first day of the NFL draft. Be back in a flash. Okay, you're on the island. I know it's the middle of the day. It's draft day. I had to take a break from the regular day because I'm excited. I'm sure you're all excited. First time in 3 seasons that the 49ers have actually had a first round draft pick. Obviously, the last one we made was Mr. Trey Lance, who's no longer with the team. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a short moment. But I also want to just kind of outline what the 49ers need to accomplish coming out of the weekend, essentially. So, 10 total picks over the course of 3 days. Obviously, all eyes are on the first round for a number of reasons. I just mentioned first time that they're going to be picking in the first round, or at least slated to pick in the first round in a couple of years. Obviously, there's the BA drama going on as well in terms of like, hey, are we going to move them? This is the culmination of those events. Everything makes you feel like if they were to move them, it would be for compensation that they could leverage and utilize on this day specifically. So, maybe Thursday comes and goes. BA remains a San Francisco 49er, and we can put those woes to rest, at least until next offseason, because everything always comes full circle with this team to the content that just keeps on giving. But as I mentioned, we have 10 total picks this weekend, beginning this evening with number 31 overall. Friday evening, you're going to be 63rd overall and 94th. So second and third round picks. And then the next 6 picks throughout the third day, they'll be really busy. With 7 picks on the final day of the draft. So they'll be really busy. First thing I want to call out is regarding the 10 picks. And by the way, gang, it's the middle of the afternoon, right? So if you're logged in, you're watching this, like this is the opportune time, ask questions, going to engage with them. Other than that, you're just going to hear me kind of freestyle here for the next 20, 30 minutes or so, just to try to temper my excitement related to the draft. But I go back to John Lynch's most recent press conference, where he specifically talked about the talent in this draft, how the back half doesn't really have them as excited as maybe it has in years past, and being loaded with picks. This is a very deep team already. You can tell by their approach in free agency. They spread it out across the board, right? Addressing all different positions, all areas of concerns, trying to get roster depth in there, camp bodies, people who might be able to even come and compete for some playing time, which really leaves them in a position to essentially draft best player available on their board every time they pick. But more importantly, with those 10 picks, what's the mantra? Are you packaging and sliding up and sliding back accordingly to really target certain individuals that your team has pegged over the course of the evaluation? Are you trying to shift and move and stockpile some picks for next year, which seems what the 49ers are always doing? I can't remember a draft where they haven't gone in with at least 9 picks for the draft. So again, a lot to be excited about if you're a 49ers fan. Let's go through some of the identified needs, right? So we're thinking in the defensive backfield, specifically at corner, they're going to want to add some depth outside of Demo and Mooney Ward. We can all argue up and down the offensive line, just not now, but certainly a future need with a pending retirement of Trent Williams, probably coming in the next year or so. We can talk about wide receiver being an area of need, especially given the BA drama, some drama around Debo. Yes, I know he's under contract, but it's going to be a lot easier to get out from underneath that contract next season, which I suspect they will investigate. The Dre Greenlaw injury looms large, right? Is there more depth required at the linebacker position? And I know this is probably not a popular opinion, but I think they still need extensive help along the defensive line, both interior and on the edge from a pass rush perspective. I mean, this team has always been firing on all cylinders when that defensive line um, acts accordingly and is getting after the quarterback and able to pressure with four. And that allows them to do some things with the front, the seven behind that front four. So again, a lot to unpack here. So if we think about specifically this evening and the 31st overall pick, I want to hear from you. Like, what do you think they're going to do? What direction do you think they're going to go? I don't even need to hear a player's name because, candidly, you hear John Lynch talk about it. You hear other general managers talk about it. Usually 15 to 20 first round grades given and assigned to prospects. I know that grade means very little in the grand scheme of things, but the reality is when you're picking at 31, that means you're probably picking, quote unquote, from an evaluation perspective, second round talent, even though it's in the first round. If I'm giving you my hot take, I don't think they're picking at 31. The eternal optimist in me says that they are going to package 31 with a player, with other picks to go up and maybe identify one of those 15 to 20 prospects that John Lynch specifically said 22, but one of those 15 to 20 prospects that they have a first round grade on it. So then if you're moving up, it's more about, okay, what's the talent going to be on the board in the, within those slots? Is it going to be some of the lingering offensive line talent? Is it going to be wide receiver? We know that this draft is filled with depth at both of those positions. So what are you going to do? Which leads me to believe they're trading back. I would argue that the 49ers are probably not picking at 31. So 49er fans, we're going to sit there all night watching this, getting really excited, watching names come off the board, hoping the player that we fell in love with or that we gave our own first round evaluation to or linked the 49ers to is going to be available. And then we'll probably get to picks like 25, 26, and you're going to hear that the 49ers traded out of 31. I think it's prudent to look at that, right? Can you stockpile day 2, day 3 picks for that slide out? 31 carries a lot of appeal for teams that might be drafting at the top of the second round. So looking at similar names, but hopping into the first round allows them to exercise that 5th-year control of the contract, right? So if you're drafted in rounds 2 through 7, 4-year contracts, right? If you're drafted in the first round, there's a 5th-year player option that teams have the ability to exercise if that individual pans out for them. And I think that carries a lot of appeal if you're targeting, especially certain positions. Like maybe it's an edge rusher at the end of the first round. Maybe it's a quarterback. Maybe it's Michael Penix, who's not really labeled in the top handful of quarterbacks right now that we expect to go at the top of the first round. Maybe that's a team that wants to slide into the end of the first round, be aggressive, and get 5th-year option on maybe the quarterback of their future. So that's my gut. My gut tells me the Niners are not picking at 31. I think they will. I hate saying this aloud because I so badly want them to be aggressive and go and get the player that they identified would immediately contribute to this team. I just don't know if there is one, right? In the latter stages of the first round. So my gut tells me they're not picking 31. They'll end up sliding out. They'll stockpile picks for day 2, day 3, maybe even early picks, day 1, day 2 for the 2025 NFL draft. But let's say they stay at 31. Let's entertain ourselves for a little while. Like, What's the position? Who's the player? Whatever it might be. I don't often talk about individual players. I'm thinking more on the lines of philosophy in terms of what position would the 49ers covet, and that's a double-edged sword here because since they do tend to set themselves up to draft for best player available, it's really hard to pinpoint what direction they're going to go until they're on the clock and you know who's no longer available. I think if they're sitting at 31, they're going to be really curious as to uh, what interior offensive linemen are going to be left and what wide receivers are going to be left at the bottom half of that first round. Is it, any of the kids from Texas? Is it the other kid from LSU, not named Malik Neighbors? There's some interesting names there. But to me, sitting at 31 feels like it's either going to be a corner or an edge rusher, ideally, right? That's what I'm thinking. Is it Chop Robinson? Is it one of the top 5 corners that might be remaining at that point in the draft? That's just where I think they would go. Here's my thought. If you stay at 31, there should only be 2 reasons. You didn't find a trade partner that was willing to move or give you anything exciting to move or slide out 5, 8 slots, whatever it is, into the second round. And or that right then and there you are drafting somebody that you feel like would be set up to immediately contribute to this team. That's the biggest problem. This is not a team void of talent that's drafting in the top 10 year over year over year. Their issue here is they have 10 picks. There are not 10 roster spots to be had onto this team. So this is why I want them to be aggressive and go find somebody on day one, package some of these picks, excite a team that is void of talent, that needs multiple bodies to field an able team, and go get somebody. I'm not even sitting here telling you the player. I don't really care who the player is. If they're being picked in the first round, given this regime's first round track record outside of Nick Bosa, that player you take has to contribute immediately. We talk all the time about windows open, windows closing, and is the window to the Super Bowl closing? Like, it kind of is. And it kind of is because they've enjoyed the luxury of having a lot of flexibility at the quarterback position and not having massive contracts tied into that so they can pay their other players. That's done at the end of this season, right? You're going to pay either Brock Purdy based off of his performance the last season and a half and hopefully this season, or you're going to make the decision to say, okay, we've seen enough. It's mediocre at best. We're going to move on, and I got to go pay somebody else to keep this wheel moving forward with the aging talent that you have. And the reality is, as I mentioned it when we started, they haven't picked in the first round since Trey Lance. And didn't have a second round pick last year, right? Like, their first pick wasn't until late in the third round in the last draft. That's a couple bodies here and there and position slots here and there that could ultimately be the future of the team that aren't on this team. So when roster churn happens at the end of 2024, like it's going to happen going into 2025, you might be looking around the room and say, I don't see the guys that have 2-3 years experience under their belt and are willing to explode onto the scene. You might be relying on talent drafted in 2024 that's got 0 NFL experience, and then talent that you're going to draft in 2025 that's going to have 0 NFL experience. You need to find 3 to 4 contributors in this draft, and maybe it takes all 10 picks, right, to find those folks. But the reality is, the 10 names that are going to be called over the weekend or potentially could be called over the weekend for the San Francisco 49ers are not going to be San Francisco 49ers once camp is said and done. It's just the nature of the business. So what do you have to look forward to tonight? I think, like most 49er fans, I think we want to get through the BA saga. We should start to feel pretty comfortable that if there is no movement on day one of the draft, it's increasingly likely that he remains a 49er, because that would be what the motivation that would move the 49ers is, to get an extra piece to play with or even replenish the player and the position here in the first round tonight. That's one thing. Second is, let's see how the 49ers feel about this roster. Are they going up and identifying a specific player that fills a specific gap? Because that should tell you how they feel about that position of play. Or are they sliding out? They feel good about this. They want to stockpile picks. They want the board to fall to them. And maybe they did. They had some stronger evaluations, and you notice a lot of their visits were not fringe first round talent. You're talking about third, fourth, fifth round guys. Maybe that's a little bit more in their wheelhouse and where they're comfortable, and they want to stockpile for the middle rounds to find a diamond in the rough or a contributor. Like, they've had success in third rounds. They've had success in the fifth round. We've seen that across this regime. So we'll see. But what I would say is that, gosh, anything can happen. It's the NFL draft. What I would caution the 49ers on is to not get caught up in the excitement watching all these teams add shiny new toys to their arsenal, and you experience FOMO and feel like you need to go get somebody to get somebody. That's not the play here. The play here in this draft is be prudent. Stick to the homework that's been done over the last year and a half on these prospects by your scouts and your player evaluation teams, and find the guys that fit the locker room and that you think have a chance to immediately come in and compete. And I don't know. This is what I hate about the draft. What I hate most about the draft is we spend the majority of the offseason looking at and evaluating these players to fall in love with players that have like a 2% chance of actually landing on your team. I try to use the draft to understand the mindset of the coaching staff, of the general manager of the team that I root for, to understand where they think we are the weakest. What are they evaluating most in depth, right? So when you look at the folks that they have had for top 30 visits, et cetera, is there a heavy concentration on a single position? That's telling. Is it spread across the board? Is that also telling? One thing I could say is that I feel like the 49ers have put a couple more eggs in the offensive line basket, whether that's for immediate impact now or for future needs, than they have in years past. And I like that. I know we talk all the time that the 49ers, are probably more comfortable with the offensive line than we as fans are. But I trust what I see, and I know there is ample opportunity for improvement with this offensive line, especially if you feel like you have your quarterback of the future. You need to shore that up. So I kind of stand on my statement in the sense of, like, if you're staying at 31, you're moving up. If you're in the first round in general, that, to me, based on the way this roster is constructed right now, can't be a developmental player or a developmental pick. It needs to be an impact now pick. So, but again, I want your thoughts on this. I don't pretend to know all. I just tell you what I see and how I feel about my team, and what decisions they do make and decisions that they don't make. And I think a lot will be uncovered this weekend on how the coaching staff and leadership feel about how this roster is constructed, how they feel about very specific position groups based on potential, not just players they draft, but how they talk about those players post-draft, what excites them about those individuals. But the NFL draft for fans is Christmas time, right? Or whatever holidays we love to celebrate, because you are, no matter how you splice it, you are unwrapping new toys that your team is going to soon be able to play with. Now, over the next few days, you're going to see winners, losers. I'm no different. I'll probably put out some information like in content regarding that as well. Take it all with a grain of salt, right? As fans, we're all going to think that the 49ers made the right pick. Every single one of these picks made the right move, give you a million reasons as why that player could cut into the starting lineup. Here is the reality. The reality is 3 to 4 contributors need to be found in this draft. If I'm being realistic, you need somebody to contribute on the interior offensive line. You need somebody to contribute on the defensive line. And you definitively, whether BA stays or goes, you need another wide receiver. Jawan Jennings probably not back in 25. I'd have to imagine Debo's probably not back in 25. So here you are, run it back, with the existing skill positions, but that's where you need to, replenish the stable. And I think those are the three most important positions in this draft where they have to find contributors. Wide receiver, the interior of the offensive line. I know that's controversial because none of y'all, Aaron Banks has played well. John Feliciano did an admirable job in his time last year, and y'all seem to hate Colton McKivitz, but I would argue that the interior needs to be strengthened first and foremost, specifically center, probably right guard position. That needs to be rectified, and I think it needs to be rectified now in this draft. Somebody who can go into camp and compete. So that's my thoughts. I just needed to get this off my chest. I'm really excited for obviously for the draft this evening. I'm really excited to see what the San Francisco 49ers do with that 31st pick. But more importantly, I think day 3 is going to be, obviously that's the highest volume of picks, but can they find 1 to 2 diamond in the roughs like they have in years past? And selfishly speaking, I'm very intrigued with their first 4th rounder, 124 overall. That's the pick that they acquired from the Dallas Cowboys for the Trey Lance trade. So how do you parlay 3 first-round picks and a 3rd round pick back into your 4th round pick? Who did you get player for player when all is said and done with the exchange with the Dallas Cowboys on Trey Lance? So appreciate y'all. This is Island 49. I'm Weston Smith. Please subscribe to the channel, leave comments. Want this to be highly interactive. I always say that I'm not an expert. Just love my team. Always want to be talking about the team, all elements at football. And I'm going to give you my opinion of 35 years just watching the NFL and specifically watching the San Francisco 49ers and how they behave. But again, Island 49, subscribe, sign up for the notifications. We'll get hot and heavy post-draft as we really get into the doldrums of the NFL season, OTAs, etc. But before you know it, camp will be here, and can't wait for fall ball to come around. But appreciate you chiming in. Enjoy the draft.